hi everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's roundtable on the future of pigment inks in the textile inkjet printing market. Pigment inks are a growing but challenging area of the textile inkjet market, and it's going to be interesting to hear some viewpoints from key industry players on the pigment market, you know, the technology, its difficulties, and what's in store for the future. So I'm Madeline Thomas, Editor of Industry Digitalisation at WTIN, the host of Innovate Textile and Apparel's virtual trade show. I'm also the editor of a number of our journals, so Textile 4.0, International Diet and Finisher, and importantly for this roundtable discussion, Digital Textile Journal. So I'll be your host for the roundtable, and I'd like to introduce you to our participants, who are all from major ink OEMs. So firstly, we have Simon Daplin, formerly of Sentient, and now newly the Manager of Product Marketing at Sun Chemical Corporation. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Madeline. Nice to be here.
And then we have Eric Baylor, Global Marketing Manager at Digital Printing at DuPont.
Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, everyone.
And then Marco Girolo, Marketing and Communications Manager at JK Group and MS Printing Solutions, part of Dover Digital Printing.
Hi to everybody.
So just a quick bit of housekeeping before we begin. If you've any questions for our participants at all, then just please feel free to submit these in the live discussion thread that we have available. So firstly, I think we'll kick off just by asking you all about how the pigment market has been this year. It's been a crazy year for everybody. There's been lots of changes in terms of the global economy and industry with COVID-19. How has the pigment market been affected? What do you guys think is the market share of digital pigments compared to other ink types, and has this or will this be impacted by the coronavirus?
So from my point of view, I mean, the year has been pretty terribly disturbed by the COVID-19 crisis across the board, not just from a pigment point of view, but also all the digital inks in general within the textile market. I think most reports show a reduction in orders or production of between 30 and 50%, depending on where you're situated in the world. And I don't think pigment has been any better or worse than any of the technologies. It's just the standard state of the market and the challenge that we face. In terms of the overall market share from our point of view and like from the research that we've done from our experience in the field and looking at kind of output from WTIN and others, we're probably still only around 5% share in terms of pigment of the overall digital textile market. Obviously, when you look at direct-to-garment printing, that percentage is hugely higher. It's more like 90-95%. But in terms of the wide format and fashion and those kind of industries, then it's still a pretty small representation when you compare it to something like dye sublimation, which digitally accounts for around 50% of the ink that's sold.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For JK Group, frankly speaking, this year was quite good, but for a simple reason, because for us, still remain a niche, the pigment printing. It's less than our 5% of our business. Frankly speaking, we are growing more than last year, but for a simple reason that is related to the fact that we did some installation at the end of the last year. So thanks to the fact of new installation, thanks to the fact of some ink swapping, we are growing about 60%. 60. But in general, I completely agree with Simon, because of course the market is affected by this crisis. Maybe the pigment less than most popular inks market as sublimation or as reactive, because it's a niche, it's smaller than the others. This is the simple reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree with similar experience with Marco. actually, what we've noticed this year is pigment roll-to-roll actually has been strong for us in a down year overall, right? And I think there's some very good reasons here, and I think we're about to talk about several of them, right? It's there's a lot of flexibility in moving to pigment, roll-to-roll printing. Along with dye sub, it's the easiest to get going with, right? It has a low barrier to entry from a equipment investment standpoint, right? It gives you low environmental footprint. You don't need washer, steamer, and so forth, right? And you can do short runs. So it's all the things that are extremely attractive in a world that wants to basically reduce the length of its supply chain. Pigment roll-to-roll gives you that opportunity to capitalize on it. So I think our customers are seeing that, and I think overall you can see from the multiple announcements that exist in our industry, the offering has improved, right? So our customers are rewarding that improved offering by saying the product is better. We have conditions that show pigment roll-to-roll, for example, is very attractive. So they're voting with their investment and their activities.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned there, Eric, that the pigments are more environmentally friendly than other types of inks, such as reactive or dye sub. But in the roll-to-roll digital textile printing market, cost has always been a driving factor of investment, and the cost of pigments are still high compared to other ink types. So is the green message the key selling point of pigments, and how much does cost outweigh this message?
I think the green message is one of the selling points. Mm-hmm. And again, when we say green, we have to I think I like to take a bigger lens, right? So, green, you have, the first thing you think about is chemicals and water, right? So clearly, pigment and dye sub in that regard have an advantage over both the analog and the other chemistries, because their chemicals are low impact and water usage is not needed. The difference between pigment and dye sub is paper. Now you can do direct printing, of course, on dye sub, but in pigment you don't have paper, right? So that's another one. And then if you think about, especially versus analog, but also if you think about the larger production typically that reactive, would be into, you can do very short runs and you can set them up, run them. So your inventory is going to be less. So you have less inventory, less no sale. All these things are environmental impact, and all these things are dollar impact. Mm-hmm. And right, washer, steamers, you need energy to run it. So no question, if you have installed capacity on some of the other competing options, it's going to be a challenge, especially today when you're struggling maybe to find investment dollars. But overall, plenty of opportunities to switch to, and reasons to switch to pigment.
Okay, Marco, have you found this? How much does cost outweigh environmental factors in choosing inks?
It's part of the discussion, of course. The main reason, in my opinion, to choose pigment are the high life fastness in comparison to reactive, for example. The process versatility, because it's possible to print on the different substrate, especially for blended fabrics. The process is more lean. It's a lean process if you compare to reactive. And of course, it's water-free process or waterless process in comparison to reactive. The cost, or better, the TCO in textile printing market is always part of the discussion. Or better, it is the discussion in a lot of cases, unfortunately, because the brand owners reduce every year the price per square meter of the final printed fabric. So our customer is obliged to find a way. But frankly speaking, it's not possible to compare price per kilo of the pigment inks with the price per kilo of reactive inks. Why? Because you are not comparing the right way the two technologies, due to the fact that the processes and the related costs are different. you have to consider that the reactive printing process is the following. It's start to pre-treatment, drying, printing, drying again, steaming, washing, and drying. So it's a long process. The pigment printing process is printing, fixing, and not compulsory, but in a lot of cases exists pre and post treatment. So it's easy to understand that the cost related to energy, water, and labor force are completely different. So considering all these aspects, I can tell you that the ink cost in this case is definitely a second aspect.
Okay. And Simon, is that something that you found as well?
Yeah, I think I agree with both. I think that there's a number of points that you have to consider. So where pigment seems a more compelling argument is with companies entering digital printing or maybe making their first investments where they perhaps don't have an existing setup that has a steamer and a washer, and there the cost of kind of startup becomes more affordable with a pigment system where you don't need all the peripheral equipment around that. From a green aspect, there's no doubt a lot of the companies that are starting with pigment, it's high on the agenda. But if you say is it outweighing cost for the majority of people, the sad reality today is no. It's probably in their top 4 considerations, but wouldn't be the number 1 criteria on the list behind price, performance, runnability, and uptime of the machine. These are all kind of have an impact on the overall TCO, as Marco was talking about. But if unfortunately, people will always compare a bottle price of one ink technology versus another and not really consider the end-to-end process. So yeah, I think there's more and more the brands need to be on message with sustainability. A lot of companies have signed up to certain initiatives to reduce waste, reduce water consumption, and pigment is certainly one way of doing that amongst a bunch of others. But I think it's really not the number 1 on most people's list. There are exceptions, people that take the sustainability very seriously, and then they're investing specifically in pigment technology for that reason.
Yeah. Do you think that the coronavirus has made people look at more sustainable options, or kind of catapulted the growth in sustainability?
Yes and no. I think people like to talk about it and how, I haven't been able to go to the shop during coronavirus. I realized I don't need to buy new items every week, and there's been a lot of kind of criticism of the fast fashion industry. But then you look at what happened when lockdown eased, and the stores that were getting the most traction were those offering low cost fast fashion printed with in higher volumes at low price. So I think the idea is very much in people's minds, far more so than before, but the reality of what people actually do with their consumer choice when they get to the store may not be fully aligned with that at the moment.
Okay. And you mentioned,
I think, if I may, I think where the COVID, it gives us a transition moment.
Sure.
So when you are in a deep transition moment where everything can be relooked at, any new technology and disruptive technology has an opportunity to gain traction, right? So I think that, because we're all trying to reinvent our businesses in some aspects, right? I don't think there's any one of us who are doing business as usual or think that 6 months or 2 years from now, we're going to be exactly doing what we did 2 years ago. So I think we're all looking at what is different. How can we serve our customers better? And our customers are doing the same thing. So I think COVID in that way is providing an opportunity for pigment inks because people will be looking at it, whereas maybe in the past, it was not part of the options they were considering.
Okay, that's
sure. No, I think there's this discussion about nearshoring, right? This idea of bringing production closer to the consumer, and if you're going to implement a new way of doing that, then pigment is a much simpler set that will allow people to be much more responsive with the short runs, not overstocking stores, being very flexible with your production and your inventory levels, and that's where, for sure, that mindset change may bring pigment higher up the agenda.
Okay, that's interesting. And you mentioned before, Simon, the D2G market and the difference in the pigment inks being used there. As we said, our intelligence platform has found that 5% of overall digitally printed textiles in the roll-to-roll market is printed using pigment inks, compared to the 95% of the D2G market being printed using pigment inks. And what do you think are the reasons for this difference, when considering high-speed production of D2G machines and printhead variants, etc.? Are there any kind of lessons to be learned from the D2G market to increase roll-to-roll market penetration?
Well, it's difficult because the industry, if you take it as a niche on its own, and it's a pretty big niche, but it's quite a different market. The sale and the proposition within direct to garment is quite different from the roll to roll market. And it was built on, I guess, modified Epson style printers and kind of very small level production units, what they call in the US mom and pop industry, where someone could invest for a pretty low amount of money, a turnkey solution that allowed them to produce garments on demand for their customers or their markets or what have you. And I think the roll to roll is a slightly different market. It tends to be slightly higher volumes. The cost point is less. The value, the kind of price per piece or the value that you add is probably slightly less or considered less. And so because of that and the higher margins that you can get for the ad that you put onto a t-shirt versus the ad that you maybe put onto a roll or a meter of fabric is different. It's enabled that to grow and pigment to really find its feet. Whereas people that are doing, let's say someone's doing reactive printing on an analog scale with rotary screen, if they're going to invest in digital technology, in many cases they're producing the same type of materials just digitally with the design freedom that gives, but they already made the investment in the pre-treatment, the stentors in the steamer, so they have the peripherals already there and set up, so it makes sense for them to maintain their output in a place where they're familiar. Where pigment is more disruptive and is allowing kind of more people to be competitive within that space.
Marco, do you agree with that?
Agree. I would like to give another point of view, but to arrive a similar point, to highlight the difference between the two technologies, the two markets, from a technical point of view. DTG and DTF or roll to roll are two markets completely different, because DTG in digital analog printing is printed with pigment for two main reasons. The fabric color background that can be dark differently than in direct to fabric or roll to roll. So the approach, the technology, the inks that are involved in these two markets are different for a simple reason that in the DTG there is the white. This could be or could seem a niche or a very fine particular, but it's something that completely changed the market. So in my opinion, it's difficult to make a benchmark between the two technology and the two market. For also consider also the other part involved as the pigments, as the cost, as the TCO, and so on. And also as, for example, the final garment, the TTG, as the target, as the t-shirt. So it's perfect for merchandising or for something that is a t-shirt for event, but it's not possible to benchmark to a roll to roll because the costs involved are completely different. So of course it's possible to learn also in this case something that the lesson could be that we have as a roll to roll market, we have to invite our customer to be a little bit more innovative and start to print also in pigments as also in this market. That's it. and switch from analog to digital as soon as possible. This is the point.
Okay. Eric, do you think there's lessons that the direct-to-fabric market can learn from direct-to-garment when it comes to pigments?
So on the technical end, I would say yes. So I completely agree with my colleagues there. It's a vastly different application. The white ink by itself stands out as unique. 80% of t-shirt printing is on dark, if not black t-shirts. So that's different. Mm-hmm. And we've been doing both now for nearly 20 years. The ink still has to go through the same type of print heads. So what you learn on designing an ink, for roll to roll, you can transfer some of it to DTG and vice versa. So there's some technical learning back and forth. And another aspect that's different is the pre-treatments, because the fabrics that you use on t-shirts are different than the fabrics that you use on roll to roll. And the process is different, so the pre-treatments are different. But interestingly, right, in DTG you spray pre-treatment, but guess what roll-to-roll printers are all asking is, we'd love to be able to spray pre-treatment. And there was just an announcement recently, and there'll be some more about sprayable pre-treatment on the roll-to-roll side. So I think you will have some migration back and forth, but as the other two panelists indicated, because the application is quite different, there is limits to what can transfer from one to the other.
Yeah. Okay. And we've talked a little bit about cost and the advantages of the environment with pigments. But what are the current challenges in the pigment market that you guys are finding? What are the barriers to entry for print service providers?
Personally, is start to print textile in non-textile districts. I mean, because it's normal to compare pigment printing roll to reactive, for example, to disperse. And in these cases, reactive and disperse everything is print in textile district, where the water waste is possible to manage, where you can find people that make a special job, like pre and post treatments outside your company and so on. So if you want to open a new company printing pre-treatment, printing reactive, you are forced to put your company in a textile district. Every country has more or less, so it's possible. But the strongest point in the past for sublimation was exactly this point. You can print sublimation outside this district because it's a water-free process. Similarly, the pigment printing could have the same success, maybe with different timing of growth, but this is one of the strongest points of pigment printing. You can print more or less everywhere. So this is a barrier, and at the same time it's an opportunity.
Yeah, it's similar to, I guess, what Simon was saying about the nearshoring opportunity as well then.
Yeah, well, from my point of view, that is an opportunity for pigment, where you'll get new players that want to produce closer to the consumer, where we reduce our reliance on kind of pre-ordering products 3-4 months in advance because it's going on a boat traveling thousands of miles, where I think you'll find stores becoming far more responsive to consumer trends, what people are buying in the stores or online, and wanting that fulfilled closer to the market so that they can cut other green issues. So I think we'll start to not only talk about the water, but carbon footprint of garments and kind of the provenance of where everything's come from more and more, and pigment has the ability to do that. Where I see challenges for pigment in the market is really hitting the big volumes in the roll-to-roll market, and competing with things like sublimation and reactive. Not number one from a color vibrancy point of view. A pigment is naturally not as vibrant as a reactive dye or a sublimation dye, and if people using that technology are going to switch. They expect the pigment to give them the benefits they want from a pigment like light fastness, but without making so many compromises versus some of the technologies that they're using. And it's a mindset, both from a consumer point of view and those doing the printing. We talked a lot about the price, and the price is still something that people consider a barrier. As I say, they do look at a bottle price in a lot of cases rather than what the total cost of ownership may be. And I think maybe we talk about in terms of the fashion, pigment has, rightly or wrongly, a reputation for not feeling as nice on the fabric. So certainly if you're printing very thin kind of viscose or cottons or silks or some of the high-end polyesters that are made to feel in very kind of luxurious in the fashion industry, the association of a pigment resin-based system creating a difference in how the fabric feels after print is something that probably needs to be overcome for it to really hit the mainstream from that point of view.
Okay. Eric, do you agree with this?
No, I think so. I see barriers to entry, but by the way, hopefully you'll hear it from the way I speak about pigment. I'm very optimistic of the growth, right? And but one of the barriers, and I think Simon, you touched upon it, is some of our customers have had prior negative experiences with pigment ink and roll to roll.
Yeah.
And the situation here, and I think is, the people who are in Marco and Simon's teams and our teams, we should compliment them because they've made tremendous progress on the technology side. And now these horror stories from 5+ years ago are basically things in the past. And now we can inkjet pigment ink that has vibrant colors, and we can do it on a low maintenance standpoint, which several years ago people were saying, why would I do that, right? So once you eliminate this this barrier to say, oh, it's more complex or it's more difficult, has more issues, if you eliminate that view, right, and show them the new reality, which is no, you can print hours upon hours with pigment ink today, get great colors, and not have to worry about maintenance. So I think that's one of the key aspects. The other one is going to be around investment, right? So the current environment, and this is true for most industries, because it's a downturn overall, investment money is not available. Mm-hmm. The positive is all the other aspects we said is we want to shorten the supply chains, right? We want to lower our environmental footprint. And there also lies onto who makes that decision. Because if you are, a fashion or, a fashion brand or a home furnishing brand, and environmental footprint is a key component of what you're looking for. But if you don't specify how your fabrics are going to be printed, then there will not be a change. So I think and I think Marco was mentioning it, a lot of people are talking about the environmental footprint aspect. And the question is, are they translating that into action? So that's a challenge. Are we going to translate our realization of the footprint of the textile industry and do something about it, or we'll just talk about it? So I think that's the challenge, is the call to action there.
Yeah. And is
yes.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I completely agree, because also there are a lot of interest from the brand owner, big brands in sportswear or whatever, to create month by month a new RSL, restricted substances list, that is more restricted. And so they put the attention to the chemical composition of the inks. That is completely right, this thing. I agree with that. But also they have to start to think about the process, because also the process, so explain to their customer, that they are also our customer, that there are processes that are more green or waterless or water-free, and also are greener than the others. It's important, because at the end, there is no the chemical part, but there are also the energy saving, the water saving, and the labor saving in some way. I mean, the way to print that is more safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Eric, you mentioned the fashion industry quite a bit there. Is the fashion, and Simon, you mentioned the hand feel of pigments as well. Is the fashion industry a real target for pigments? And can the quality of dye systems, dye-based systems like reactives, be matched with digital textile pigments now? Do you think that pigments are now good enough to rival these in fast fashion, or is the cost barrier still too high for fast fashion?
So if you ask me, my answer is a resounding yes. Yes. So but I've already disclosed, full disclosure, right? I'm a big fan of roll-to-roll pigment printing, and the reason why I say yes is we've done some printing with some of our latest inks and matched the gamut of reactive ink. So you can achieve some of these amazing colors that one achieves with reactive with pigment. Now, there are some aspects of the gamut that are going to be more difficult. There's some aspects that you might have to put to work at it from a setup standpoint. But the gap is no longer what it was, again, 5 years ago. So I think, it's reachable. But if you think about, and I think in your questions earlier, you had mentioned about the home furnishing. The challenges there are much more muted. The challenge is on cost, right? But again, it's the cost, as Marco was pointing out, the cost of what? And so if it's the cost of the order, and now I want drapes or I want a sofa that's only in my house, right? You're going to have to go digital to make it cost effectively. And so I think on the home furnishing side, the progress is from a pre-treatment and ink standpoint, and the can deliver the hand feel, can deliver the fastness, can deliver the color intensity. And one of the interesting things that I learned, because I'm a little bit of a rookie here on the textile side. I've only been involved, for the last 5 years, but digital on the home furnishing side can provide detail of patterns that analog cannot. So you can reach some images that cannot be reached on the analog side. So I've said before, I believe, there's a lot of opportunities for pigment. I think our customers are showing that to us right now because it's growing in a down year. But yes, I think we can overcome the challenge, and I think there's opportunities for pigment.
Simon, do you think fast fashion is ready for pigment inks?
I say yes and no. Actually, if I pick the point of home fashion, I think that will become the next fast fashion. The need of people to want something different. Same as if you walk into a Zara store or an H&M or whatever today, and you see the fashion there, and you go in next week and it's different because everybody wants something different, and they turn their collections so often. I think you'll see more and more bespoke or personalized furnishings or things that are more unique to the user, and pigment printing is the way probably to do that. And I think it'll be fast fashion, but maybe in a different aspect. In terms of what we today call fast fashion, I think it's a number of the factors that I mentioned before, where certainly some users have already made such significant investments in their end-to-end process in machines, in steamers, in stentors, that they'll probably continue with the technology that they have today in terms of reactive or sublimation or whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean that pigment doesn't have a place. I think it will probably find one. It depends a little bit on the fabrics as well. I think there's the general perception that pigment can honestly print onto any type of fabric, and the reality is still a little bit far away from that. And all the other inks have those limitations too, right? So there's no criticism there. Reactive, you can only print on a cellulosic like cotton or viscose, right? And a sublimation really only works well on a polyester substrate, some polyamides. But pigment really is very successful on natural fibers and some blends of a certain level, as soon as you start getting to polyester, I know there's been some developments with certain companies recently releasing pigment sets specifically for polyester, and that's a fantastic kind of development. And I think the way pigment will head is needing to really be applicable for all substrates, and then it has a big chance to hit the mainstream because it gives the printers a much greater flexibility in the kind of garments that they can produce, and that will play into the hands of the fast fashion market.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Marco, do you agree with Simon's point there?
I agree with them. The gap is not so big, and the possibility to print with fish in the fashion market, it's existing, and we have customers that are playing in this market. So we are in the common area as headquarters. So in an area of fashion, it's more silk area than others. But of course, we have customers that are printing not only in Como, but they are printing in fashion or in moda in Italian language.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, yes, Simon and Eric. Sorry, go on. Go on, Eric.
I just want to, Simon made a very important point about the fabrics you print on, right? And I'm going to make an analogy with the beginning of the desktop publishing, right? And so we participated in that, in the early 90s. And when you talk about, printing at home, the amount of the papers that were available was very limited, and it was also expensive, right? Why? Because you didn't have that many people printing. And the paper manufacturers said, well, I'm not going to make a special inkjet paper. Fast forward to today and the world of commercial printing, paper manufacturers are making specialty papers for digital printing. So, once the momentum gets going also on pigment, you will get this expansion of fabric and pre-treatment combinations that will, again, fully help the success of pigment printing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You mentioned, and as did Simon as well, that the home textile market, and Simon mentioned smaller runs in the home textile market potentially as well, because the home textile market is known for its high volume, and because of that, like fast fashion, it needs to have low cost, and it's mostly manufactured in the manufacturing nations such as China, India, Bangladesh, for example. How are these countries responding to pigment inks for digital printing? Because we did discuss that we think pigment printing will be successful at nearshore or reshoring markets. Is there a place for pigment printing on a mass scale in these industrial manufacturing nations?
So yes, if you look about where do we have interest in pigment printing, it is worldwide, and it is also in those countries where, let's say India and Bangladesh, where you have a large proportion still of analog printing or traditional printing. So, but the key advantage when you think about on the home furnishing side is this ability to do this mass customization. And so it will be true for their regional market as well as it will be true for the regional market. So what you'll have is, printers in India, printers in China that will be able to mass customize for their regional consumption, and they can really target the fabrics, for that market. We all know I'm originally from France. I live in the US. I have some colors I like, and I'm sure it's different than what Marco likes and what Simon likes. We all have that color palette in our head, and this mass customization is what digital pigment will be able to achieve, so that we all get the colors we really want.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a ways to go for a couple of reasons on the home fashion market. Number one, today, whether we as print providers like it or not, the majority of home furnishings are monocolor or very simple designs, and for long runs like you get today, conventional printing is a better solution. Just the fact of it today, as these consumer trends kind of get more common, of people wanting more pattern, more design on their home furnishing, on their bedding, something more unique to them, sure, pigment digital will really come in. But while the majority of the population is still buying very simple design or essentially block color, some of the benefits that you realize from inkjet don't translate as well into those environments. And the reality is that they're not responding to consumer demand in the same way as fast fashion does. You don't need to release a collection every 2 weeks like Zara does on a home fashion front. And so they can commit to very long runs of more simple designs. And the sad reality of the world today is it's done cheaper and with conventional printing in China, in Bangladesh, in Thailand particularly, and Indonesia for home fashion. Conventionally because of that reason. But as consumer trends change, as people pick up on the fast fashion kind of concept in home furnishing, then we'll probably start to see a much bigger infiltration of digital print in those areas.
Marco, for you, have you found the same?
Yes, because of course in this case, more than pigment, the word that allow us to enter in this market is the word digital, of course, that give to the people the advantages of the customization. In this case, differently than the fashion market, we have just the gap of transform the analog printing in digital printing, but with the same technology in terms of chemical. And because if we are comparing a market that is printing with pigment in both cases, could be analog, could be digital, but in home textile is mainly printed with pigment. And so there is just one step to enter. Going back to the previous topic, that there was the fashion. In that case, there was 2 steps, because the people currently are printing reactive in analog printing. So you had to switch from analog to digital and from reactive to pigment. So it's more difficult. Of course, I agree with my colleagues that it's difficult because the needs of the market on textile, it's a little bit different than fashion. So ideally, to enter with pigment, you must have a market that with the needs of fast fashion, but with the attitude of home textile. But of course, we can enter, and also I believe that we can enter in both cases.
Okay. So I think we've covered quite a lot of the market. I want to ask a technical question now. As you guys obviously know, Pigment inks use binder technologies. The ideal scenario for OEMs is to have pigment and the binder together in one package. But with high binder loads, it has caused problems with operability and frequent stops. And so the way forward currently has been to lower the amount of binder used and instead add the pre-treatment. But not using the pre-treatment is obviously a sustainable advantage of pigment inks that we've already discussed. So what are the developments in this area? Is using the pre-treatment the way forward, the way to combat this, or?
In my opinion, the aspect of the binder, I think all the guys can agree with me, is overpassed. I mean, more or less all the players, I mean, the big brand that are playing the textile digital pigment inks find the right balance of a binder. Right. It's different than in the past that the customer has some doubt that if you don't remove or stop in the right way the machine, everything is blocked and clogged. Of course, now we have more experience. All the players have more experience. One thing is telling this point to you, one thing is convince the customer, but we are all on the same page that the binder is not a problem. In terms of pre and post treatment, of course, we have to fix some point. I mean, the pre-treatment help the customer to achieve better printing result in terms of brightness, and post-treatment help to achieve better rubbing fastness. Of course, everything is in function of what is the final use of the printed fabric. So in a lot of cases, it's not necessary both pre and post treatment. In some other cases, you need one or both. Of course, you have to consider that you can do, in some cases, inline this, or if you are not in a textile district, you can use third-part companies that help you and stock your pre-treatment fabric or post-treatment fabric.
Mm-hmm. Simon, are binders still an issue, and what is your opinion on pre and post treatment?
No, I think Marco's right. I think the reality is maybe ITMA 2015, some of the earlier industrial pigment inks were heavily reliant on adding binder in a different step than the ink, but the technology's kind of moved the pace since then, and most of us now, I think, are including binder within the ink, and without necessarily needing a lot in any kind of post treatment. And as with all these things, as digital markets expanded, like the quality of materials that we have at our disposal is much greater across the board. So as digital becomes more successful, the producers of the raw materials understand that it's a real market that they can leverage some value or some profit from by having materials that meet the needs of an inkjet formulator and of the end user, in terms of having a system that where the pigment doesn't just sediment out in the heads and cause clogging, or you have binder drying in the nozzles, all the horror stories, as Eric mentioned earlier, that people still associate with pigment, even though the technology's kind of moved on so much since then. In terms of the pre and post treatment, again, I think Marco's absolutely right. I think in the majority of cases, the pre-treatment now is purely to control the drop on the surface, so that you can limit the penetration. You can then hold the color nearer the surface, which gives you a more vibrant color, and it controls any kind of sideways spread or kind of print defect that you may see. So it's really just for that. There's no other performance, but it's a chemical input that in the future, I guess most people would prefer not to do. And from a post-treatment point of view, I think most of us would formulate as far as possible to eliminate a post-treatment step, but there will always be applications where it's advantageous to put a supplementary coating on for the specific application needs, and that will vary on a case by case. But more and more now, I don't think it's a required step, more an optional or preferred step for certain things.
Right. Okay. Eric, I saw you nodding your head there. Is that in agreement?
I'm all in with Simon and Marco on this. And the thing is, and you know, my background is science also. There's still science to be applied, right? Mm-hmm. But the issues, as Marco and Simon were describing, of can we include binder or not, we've settled that. Yes, we can include binder, and we can have a great ink with binder. So can we continue to optimize what binder to use? Can we continue to optimize the pre-treatment? Can we continue to optimize the type of fabric that's being used? Yes to all of those, right? So there's still plenty of science to continue to improve and optimize, but you know, I think that we are at the level that the quality of the print and the durability of the print that can be achieved is definitely makes it as a totally valuable, not only technical success, but business success.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I hope this discussion can, I guess, go somewhere towards dispelling these myths and these old horror stories, and that still linger on that you've discussed. I guess now I just want to give you guys the opportunity to discuss any key developments coming up in terms of pigment inks in the digital textile printing market. You know, is there anything that we should be looking out for from each of the companies, or any kind of market trends you guys want to discuss?
I can go. I won't specifically talk about what we're working on but suffice to say that pigment is an area that we're interested in developing further. And I think what Eric said in the last point is true, that for sure we're always looking at ways to improve the pigments we use, the binders, the end user properties that we can get. I think from a market point of view, I think you'll find that's from an ink part, that will be the focus. Cleverer ways of dispersing pigment, getting the vibrancy, the way we implement binders to get even better fastness than we're able to today, and better handle of the final fabric, so that what you want is a situation where someone really doesn't tell the difference, can't tell if it is a pigment or a reactive or a sublimation print, that it's just a print to them, and they're not questioning what technology has been used.
Yeah.
I think in the general market, what we'll see, and okay, it was kind of shown at ITMA last year. I think Kornit did it, but I see more and more the option and the benefit of pigment in being a full end-to-end single shot process, where you've got a workflow that allows you to do pre-treatment, print, and fixation essentially in line, maybe even cutting in line. And look, that's where some of the big brands, that's where Amazon is making investments, that's where others are looking towards. So I don't think it's just about the chemistry. I think the chemistry will be the driver for the acceptance of pigment as an overall technology, and then the equipment will be what really makes it something for the user to accept as something that's a real viable option in the market.
Yeah, I think everybody's, well, I'm excited to see what Sensing and Some Chemical are going to come up with next. So let's see. Eric, is there anything from the DuPont side that you'd want to discuss in terms of what we can expect?
Yeah, so we've been we've had a broad portfolio from low viscosity to high viscosity of pigment inks, and that we've carried for many years, and we have our latest offering on the mid viscosity side, which is P2700. And one of the advantages there is that your crock fastness, both wet and dry, are 4 or better, and this is, and you don't get cardboard in return, right? So it's still great hand feel. All these things are important. As I said, the science continues to optimize, right? And many other suppliers are offering systems so that are very strong in that regard. So I think I would invite all those who are listening to us to go and investigate what the offerings are from all of us. And I think they'd be surprised at the strength of the pigment offering that exists today. And we're not done, right? You heard Simon. They're working on it, and I know Marco, they're working on it. We're not done. I think if you think about the combination of pre-treatment fabric and ink, I think there's work to be done. There can be some creative things that can be done that are not done today, and could unlock some other potential. So yeah, I've already told you multiple times, I'm positive. Now, I'm sure for the skeptics out there, they say, well, people were saying that 10 years ago. I would say yes, but I think we all agree what the technology delivers today from multiple suppliers, right? So it's important from multiple, you have multiple solutions, both on a print, on an ink, on a fabric, on a pre-treatment basis. That's what helps growth, right? Because our customers want flexibility, they want choice, and it exists today, and it's good choice.
Marco, with JK Group, is there any developments we should look out for?
First of all, we believe in a growth of this technology, and the key of the success, as we discussed before, could be, and I believe that is the water-free process. Of course, as Eric told us, our role as an ink manufacturer is to study a new solution or refresh this solution to allow to the customer to have the most performant ink solution. We believe in this technology. I wouldn't be here otherwise. This is the reason why, after 5 years of experience in these markets, because we launched our first pigment for high productivity machine, I mean for Kyocera printheads in ITMA Milan, so it means 5 years ago. We are launching the refresh series. So we are launching the Digis Arcade Choice 4.0. This is the result of all the study. This is an important step that we catch thanks to the fact that we listen every day our customer, the suggestions, the opinions, the criticism that they may highlight to improve our performances. In this way, we obtain an ink with better reliability by improving printability and drying. Of course, we work also in the colors range, reducing our colors in terms of inks, but widening the gamut. So we work also in the color index selection. So we believe in this technology, really. So we are curious to see, and we would like to drive these changes in the next future.
Brilliant. Well, I think I've gone way over time here, but it was just so interesting I couldn't stop anybody. So I just want to say thank you to all the participants for your time and for your insights. So Simon, Erica and Marco, thank you. And thank you to our visitors for listening as well. I hope you found this discussion insightful and thought-provoking when it comes to the potential of pigment inks, both now and in the future. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.